Hi, and welcome to the Quantum Summer Symposium Career Panel. My name is Emily Mount. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the lead product manager here for the Quantum AI team. I'll be moderating this panel, and I'm joined by 5 of my teammates from across Quantum AI to answer your career questions. The session is live, so please go ask your questions because Abe is watching on the back end and he'll start feeding them to me as soon as you send yours in. I'd like to get us started with some introductions. I'd like for all of you to say your name and your role, which will be also shown on the screen, but also maybe tell a little bit about your path to get to sitting next to me right now. Maybe Dripto, we can start with you.
Sure. So my name is Dripto DeBroy. I'm a research scientist here on the team. And my path was relatively standard, I believe, for a research scientist in that I went to undergrad for physics, got a PhD in physics, and then started here. However, I think the interesting thing about my path is that I was actually working on trapped ion quantum computers for most of my background. So I was having to switch architectures when I joined. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Potter, and I'm a technical program manager here on the Google Quantum team. I work on the hardware side, so a lot of my job involves procuring and collaborating and making sure we have the parts that we need to make our systems and put them together and hand them over for software work. And my path came from industry outside of quantum. So I worked in aerospace and defense, and then I worked in commercial cameras for about 7 years. So then I joined the Google team to help with the program management.
Hi, my name is Aaron Shorter, and I'm a hardware test engineer here at Google Quantum AI. And like Rebecca, I don't have previous quantum experience. I have an associate's degree in computer electronics, and I've worked for several semiconductor companies, and my semiconductor company or experience is what actually led me to Santa Barbara, this area. I was working for a company that decided to put a pause in a project we were working on, which led to the decommissioning of that clean room space, and that also opened up an opportunity to rebuild that same clean room space with Google Quantum. At that point in time, I had about 10 years of experience in the industry. And so that's what I do here at Google Quantum AI.
Thanks, Aaron. I guess I should tell a little bit about my own path too. I also come from trapped ions, and then I also spent some time in defense and then working in augmented reality. I think my path was somewhat unique in just how the different kinds of roles that I've held. So I've been a systems engineer, I've been a technical program manager before, and now I'm in product. Thanks.
Okay, hi, I'm Ping Ye. I'm a software engineer in Google Quantum AI. Before joining Google, I was a researcher on high energy experimental high energy physics, and I've been in Google for quite a while. So after writing commercial software for like almost 10 years, I started to miss physics. So that's why I applied to join Quantum, and I'm very happy to be here now.
Yeah, so my name is Alejandro. I'm from Colombia in South America. I did my undergrad in physics and then a master's in nanoscience and nanotechnology. I think what makes me special in this panel is that I'm from South America first, but also that I didn't do a PhD. And I think that maybe it's part of these folks that want to do research that don't know if they want to go to industry or PhD. And yeah, it seems like Google Quantum, to my surprise, was a good opportunity to do that. Like not necessarily do a PhD to still gain those research skills.
Yeah. Alejandro, I know in the past you've talked to me about some of the challenges coming from Colombia all the way to quantum computing. And I bet that there are some people online now that actually are facing maybe some similar challenges. Could you give them some advice maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it's coming from Colombia. Like I remember it wasn't trivial. Like you feel like there's no very clear paths to follow to do a career in quantum. I think something that was important for me was traveling abroad and doing a master's abroad, mostly because I do feel that if you study in Colombia, you have a lot of skills to do a career in quantum, but traveling abroad and doing a master's opens other doors. So for instance, I was able to do my thesis in a lab and work with transmon qubits as well. So that gave me experience to be able to apply here. So yeah, experience abroad or be able to like gain as much of experience and knowledge from places that you can, internet too, like online courses and stuff, and talking with people. I think like connecting through LinkedIn or social media with people. I think people are so important and allow you to, I don't know, give you a different perspective. So yeah, definitely reach out to us or every other team that you're interested in for sure.
Thank you for that lead in, actually, because speaking of social media, I asked for some questions on my LinkedIn, and we're going to get started with those while we wait for your questions to roll in. So Amit asked a great question that we hear a lot, actually. And the question is Google open to hiring non-PhDs in quantum? And then a follow-up question was, if yes, what do we look for in candidates? So the answer to the first part of your question is absolutely yes. We need people who have all kinds of different skill sets, and some of those aren't often taught in academic institutions. So we absolutely, as you heard on this panel, we don't have a panel all of people with PhDs. We don't have a team with people who all have PhDs. I think the second part of his question, though, that's what do we look for in candidates, is pretty interesting. So I'd actually like to ask you this in a slightly like a variant of this. So actually, Aaron, I'll start with you. I want to know what skill will always be in high demand for your team.
I would say that the skill, if you want to call it a skill, but having grit, which means, you know, having a passion and perseverance for seeing through long-term goals. I think that the undertaking that we're doing is definitely a long-term goal, and I think being able to stay excited and be passionate about it for the incremental gains that we have is key.
Yeah, it's a big long goal that we're working on, right? Dripto, I want you to fill in the blank. I would be super excited if my next teammate could teach me to blank.
So I think one thing that I'm always interested in when we hire new people is that they come from a lot of different backgrounds. So oftentimes, I mean, our experience is all kind of narrow at the start, and when we have more teammates come in, we can have them like look at things from different perspectives or explain how they think about a problem. And oftentimes, just by like having a bunch of different perspectives, we can see which one fits the problem better and solve this thing right away that would take me a few days to really work on my own. So just bringing in different perspectives is really valuable to me.
So the diversity is what's important.
Yeah.
Ping, what do you think the team will always need more of?
Of course, diversity in technical background and skills. That's of course true, and diversity in like Dripto said, perspectives, not just on technical things, but also like human interaction, like cultural background. That's really, really important to make sure we don't, paint ourselves into a corner in any aspect. Yeah.
I like that answer. Rebecca, what's a useful skill for your team that probably isn't written in a job description?
I think communication and collaboration is really important in every job I've ever had, in every industry I've ever worked in. And we all work on teams. So being able to communicate and help each other and work together, it should be in the job description, but it definitely is universal.
It's true. So I think that Amit here hit on like maybe one of the most common misconceptions that everyone has a PhD here. But I asked the panelists to sort of discuss misconceptions earlier, and Alejandro, I would love it if you told us like what other misconceptions you see here, because I think you had a nice list.
Yeah. Let me see if I remembered all, but like things that really pop up in my mind is like having research publications before joining like such a big team. I think that it's so interesting to me to see how many of my friends back in Colombia really wanted to have like a very like excel in their undergrads or do a perfect master's to be able to go abroad. And like we're all learning in this path. Like when I went to Europe, I realized that they're also like just students that want to learn different things. So it's not as difficult as you think it is. I think it's like a lot of mental and a psychological challenge. Of course, it's not simple, it's not trivial. And if you are passionate about it, I do think that it's possible. But yeah, like having a great GPA, for example, or having research publications like many, or even one. I don't have any yet. But yeah, stuff like this.
That's great. Dripto, this is your first job out of school, right?
Yeah.
Good. Because I think I have a question for you, which is awesome from LinkedIn. He asked if the work culture here is similar to the university lab.
Yeah. So I think there's two main differences. I think the first one is that everyone has sort of had some background. And so the startup is a bit different. Like a new person come to the team, and when they get on board and they get sort of shown a problem, we have sort of like trust that there's like a big knowledge disparity in academia, right? Like if you come in as a grad student, for example, a first year grad student generally will know less than their advisor in most aspects of the problem. Here, even a new hire will probably know a lot more than me about half the problem just because they have a different background. So I think that's the first thing. And the second one I think is really interesting is sort of how projects are set up. So in academia, like especially as a theorist, like my projects were kind of small to medium-sized projects, but I was maybe the main driver or one of 2 or 3 main drivers of a project. And you have a lot more ownership of a very small project. Whereas here, you're part of a huge team. So we just put out a paper that was probably the biggest I've ever been a part of, but I'm one small part of that, that large effort. And I think so that the timescales and the types of contributions you're making are just very different, but not worse anyway.
Yeah, I actually really very much resonate with that answer too. That's been my experience too. Aaron, I know you even just discussed that you've come from a different industry, you've worked in other industries. I'm interested in how the quantum computing, working in quantum computing is different from some of those.
Sure. Yeah, I think along the lines of what Dripto said, this is a largely academic arena that we're in, and what we're doing is truly a creative endeavor. So I think that in that environment of research, of development, trial and error, that's really different than the industry that I've been involved in prior to this. And I would also say that, in our effort to scale up, is what we're trying to do is blend top manufacturing practices with that research, with this research environment. So I think those are some of the differences that I noticed.
Yeah, that blend is interesting. Rebecca, I know you've worked at a bunch of different maturity levels in terms of product. I'm interested in how this compares to some of maybe the more mature areas you've been in.
Sure. So in my last role, we were focused on producing the same thing many, many times to ship for revenue. And here we're producing something once or twice so that we can iterate on it and produce something new right afterwards. So I find that really exciting because I think it's fun to learn and quickly adapt to what you learned. So that's one of the things that appealed to me about joining this team was that chance to be working on something very, very new in the world.
I know one of the things that often comes up is, and it's from interns and from candidates that I talk to, is sort of an anxiety of not knowing everything about quantum computing before you get here. And so I think it might be interesting for us to discuss some tips for how do you pick up quantum computing on the job, and maybe also how hard that is. So Ping, I'm interested, since you came from inside of Google,
Right,
and you had this sort of physics background, but had been a software engineer. I'm interested in how you picked up quantum computing on the job.
right. I still remember the first group meeting I joined, and I think there are so many jargons that I don't understand, I've never heard of, because I was not in the quantum computing before. So what I ended up doing was, I just jot them down and create a spreadsheet and ask people, say, what does this mean? What does that mean? Right. Eventually, that grew into a quantum glossary for the whole group. Now we have more than 1,200 terms there. Yeah. And of course, then I think, I need to pick up on the knowledge. So Google has a very good program that if you sign up on some online courses, Google will reimburse part of the tuition. So I signed up that for quantum computing to gain some very basic knowledge. Yeah.
That's good. I know, Aaron, you were just talking about coming from a different industry, so I'm guessing you're also picking up a lot of quantum computing knowledge on the job.
Absolutely.
How are you doing that?
Yeah. So I mean, it's a multifold technique here. So one of the things I really enjoy, there are a few things. Lunchtime. So at lunch, I mean, how many other places or situations do you have where you're sitting down with different individuals who are experts in the field, and you're able to discuss these ideas, and also at the same time working hand in hand with them in the clean room. Another thing that I really enjoyed has been the meeting setup here. So in a lot of meetings, you have presentations from individuals who are outside of your direct work group, and you're presented with information and shown how things work and how learnings are happening. And I really appreciate that. And one example of that lately, kind of a newer one, has been the quantum devices spitball discussion, and that it's been really instrumental in learning a lot.
That sounds fun. I think I need an invite to that one. Okay, we have some questions that came in live. So the first one says, I have a degree in computer engineering. I'm like leaning towards pink because I'm expecting him to answer this. I have a degree in computer engineering. I'm looking to get started into research in quantum mechanics and computing. Can you please talk about how to get started? I think this question, like, how do I test this out? Like, how do I test out this role is maybe more different than the question we already asked. And also is one that we get asked a lot. How do I test out being a quantum like software engineer?
Okay, the one thing need to be clarified, like the software engineer in the quantum team, actually most of the time we are working on classical software, not quantum software. Okay, so so that's something that you learn, either in the college, or there are like boot camps, that you can learn all kinds of things there. But if you really want to learn like how to program a quantum processor, then that's totally different. Then you need to learn quantum computing properly, right? And that's likely 1 semester work, at least, maybe 2, right? And for me, I enrolled in that online, right? And it's like less than 1 semester work compressed. So I don't think I already have enough knowledge yet. I need to learn more. Yeah. So I think just go out there and find the courses either in your university or online.
Yeah. Georgia, actually, I get this question a lot about research scientists, where people are thinking about, a lot of people as they leave grad school are thinking about, do I go do a postdoc? Do I work in industry? And so I get this question a lot, like, how do I test out if I want to be a research scientist at Google or in industry? Do you have any good answers for that?
I mean, so I just did it and figured if I didn't like it, like, you're not trapped, I could have just left. But I think that in terms of, if you like, being a research scientist here is very similar to being a grad student, in that like you're kind of given a lot of freedom, or at least a grad student in some groups, you're given a lot of freedom and you're kind of trusted to like find useful things to do and work on them and do well at that. So if that kind of appeals to you, I think that's definitely one benefit. In terms of testing it out, like if you're still a student and you can find like a group that does research near you that you're interested in and sort of see whether you like that kind of space and that kind of work, I think that's the best chance to do it. But also even on your own, like just trying to read some papers, trying to like learn something really deeply that isn't super structured and see whether you enjoy that, or if you just prefer learning in a very structured way and then knowing something and being really like mastering something in that sense. Because this is definitely a role where at all times I'm doing something I'm kind of bad at because I just learned it and I need it right now and I'm not going to need it later and no one else is going to need it later either once I figure it out. And so you got to be okay with that feeling, I think.
I share that for product too, by the way. It's like constantly doing something you're pretty uncomfortable about. One of the questions that just came in is actually specifically for you, Rebecca. And it says, how did you find the transition from working in the aerospace industry to the quantum computing industry? There are follow-ups, so just wait. Is there a steep learning curve? What are the skills required to gain momentum in working in this field?
There's definitely a steep learning curve, but one of the things I've learned, because I've worked on different technologies multiple times in my career, people want to talk about what they know and what they are good at. And if you have skills to help them get something done, you kind of easily make a team and start moving forward. So for example, here, I hadn't worked with superconductors before. And so I didn't know a lot about that, but the people that I'm working with need things done and things built and designed and built in superconducting materials. So very quickly, they understand that I can help them with that. And then I can ask them questions and learn. So it's been excellent to transition to Google because of the way that people just expect you to contribute something and they don't give you a lot of restrictions in what you can do or ask or pursue.
Yeah. I am hearing that we're seeing so many questions. We're going to try and get to as many as we possibly can here. Okay. We have another one that says, I'm still a student and was wondering if you didn't go to quantum computing / physics, what other fields / jobs would you have pursued? Is there anyone who like has a really great answer for this one? I mean, I did actually take a kind of interesting path here that did have me leaving quantum computing. So I got a PhD in quantum computing, and then I left and I worked with the DoD as a scientist, and then I worked in augmented reality, and now I'm back in quantum computing. So I suppose that would be my answer here. Anyone else?
I think I'd pursue software and software engineering because it's so universal in every job I've ever had, the need for code. So I think that would be a good path.
And that's the path I took, basically.
Okay, so we have a question that I'm going to rephrase here. It says, what are the top 3 skills candidates are expected to have upon entry? I'm gonna ask, like, when you pick up a resume, is there anything that if you see it, you like want to keep reading, that you lean into the resume? So I'm going to start with an answer while I see Rebecca thinking, which is in her domain, which is project management. If I see project management skills, I don't think there's any role on this entire team that doesn't benefit from someone who has project management skills. Yeah, Rebecca, I know you're working on hiring. Actually, most of the teams represented here are currently hiring. Is there anything that makes you lean into the resume?
I think I like to see that people have worked on or studied more than one thing. Because if somebody just does the same thing that whole time, I think that's going to be limiting into what they're going to be able to contribute. So I like to see that people have either worked on different things or have studied a couple of different things. That's my answer.
Maybe I can follow up there too. I haven't conducted interviews in Google yet, but I think something that while I went through this path, doing a master's and then applying here, something that was surprising to me was like getting a scholarship, for instance, without an outstanding GPA and stuff. And I think this has something to do also with soft skills that many times are like, you don't think about them. So I don't know, working on different projects outside of university that show that you're like passion driven or that you are looking into other things, like showing also those different skills that you might have and making sure that they're like in your CV presented somehow. Yeah, that it's appealing. I think that's important too.
Yeah, I'm just quickly sort of adding on to that. I think that being able to communicate is one of the most important parts of being productive in this team because it's such a large like team setting. It's not where you can just work on a project, not talk to anyone for 2 months and come out of your room and be like, it's done.
Ta-da.
Yeah, like that doesn't work for most of the things we're working on. And so that's something that really, if you can kind of get that to come through, that's really good. And also sort of software, no matter that sort of mindset. Like one of the things I've learned the most, I think, while being here is that when I came out of my PhD, I could write code that I would be able to run again and no one else could. But I'd never written code where I thought that like it would really last beyond my current project, my current goals. And that's something I've really picked up a lot of here. And I think that whenever I see someone coming in who's like contributed to like an open source package like Circ, or who has done something where it shows like, oh, they can write code that like other people can consume and use. That's something I'm always excited about. So I was like, oh, you won't do what I had to do, where I had to like learn that whole process kind of on the job.
Okay, we have a question that I think is very much a ping question. And it says, what kinds of support does one have when they start at Google Quantum AI? For example, there'd be a mentorship program, group meeting, or one-on-one discussions. Would you mind giving an example? Now I'm throwing this one to Ping because I know he maintains a lot of our onboarding documentation and tools.
Well, those are just trying to smooth the onboarding process. But in Google, usually every new member get assigned a mentor. If you don't have one, ask your manager to have one. And different manager may have different strategies. What I saw that works the best is you get someone outside of your direct team, even not in the same like product area. So you get different perspective of how things are done and how the culture should be. Right. That's the mentor part. And of course, the new member. There's a famous saying like about software engineering in Google. I mean, I think software engineers is like a big chunk of Google employees that it would take you like about 6 months to be productive because there are so many things to learn. But that means you really need to have a growth mindset. That, okay, yeah, I need to learn all these things. If I don't understand, I need to be proactive and ask. Yeah, don't bury yourself in documents for days and can come back, right? So it's very important. So that's part of the communication and initiative kind of skills. And also try to talk to people, try to learn from people, try to work with people. Yeah, those are very, very important.
And ask all of your questions and be brave and ask them all, even if you think it makes you look stupid, if it's not everyone's wondering the same thing. Okay, there was a question that came in on LinkedIn that I actually wanted us to address. Because I think it's somewhat strategic, and I think a lot of the people who may be listening may have this question, which is about if there's a shortage of talent in any particular area within the industry. I think I personally get this question a lot from people who are maybe a few years out of graduating and thinking, which direction do I want to go so that there's high demand and low supply? I'll give my answer while all of you think about it, which is I think that multi-specialists, people who have specialization in more than one domain, are going to keep being really important to us. You know, we have this really complex system and so many moving pieces that we need people who understand more than one piece so that we can do the connections. And I think that's not just in technical domains, but also, like, for example, for product, it's very much business and technical and sort of merging those. So I think that, and then I think I'm pretty sure we have teammates who may be like mad at me if I don't say that they're sort of forgotten trades like microwave engineering that maybe aren't taught as often in academic institutions now, but we see a need. And so those ones, I think that's a good idea if you're wondering about this question and thinking, where do I want to go so that I'm important here? Does anyone else have any thoughts on talent shortages or where to direct somebody who has a couple more years before they're going to be entering?
I mean, you definitely took my main one, which is like sort of having two different things that you can do to some level, because that also allows you to help be a connective tissue between like the team that does A and B. And if you can explain between, if you can be useful in that sense, that's a great way for you to be useful, like right when you join, as opposed to 6 months out. But then also, I think being able to like understand a system and learn really quickly is a skill that I think you can show, and that's always valuable because then you can make yourself valuable.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Sure.
Being able to learn.
Yeah, and still wanting to.
Yeah, it's good. I think John asked earlier in the chat about, I think he asked, what are the top 3 skills that candidates gain after 1 year at Google Quantum AI? I actually think one of the things I see people changing in over their first year is how basically brave they are to either go speak to someone from a different team, sit down, lunch here is actually you sit down somewhat randomly and talk, but speak at lunch and really get engaged in the conversation. So I've seen sort of like an increase in people being brave and taking social risks. Does anyone else see things happening for people? I mean, some of us have only been here about a year. I think Alejandra's
9
there.
months. Yeah.
9 months.
Yeah, Rebecca's there. Yeah, so several of us have been here about a year. What changed maybe in you? What did you really pick up?
One of the things I've picked up is just the Google tools, which weren't ones that I had used a lot before and are pretty powerful. So I've been happy about that. And then, building the connections with the different fields that we represent amongst the team, the research scientists and the hardware engineers and software engineers, building some language to talk in those fields.
That's good.
I think for me, Git, like collaborative code work, it was so painful, to be honest. I learned so much, but it was so tough. Yeah, I was fighting with Git like for 3 months. So that's like a hard skill, if you call it that way, that I learned, but I'm feel comfortable with it right now, and it feels good. I think soft skill would be, I thought that I was like comfortable with not knowing stuff, but here I think that was like brought to like the extreme. Like there's so many things that I didn't understand, Git, for example. And feeling more comfortable with just like not knowing stuff and asking questions. I still think that I'm bothering people a lot, but like just pushing through and like asking questions. That's a skill that it's important, mostly because what we've discussed, like you don't want to get in your room for 2 months and like learn stuff. You really want to quickly learn, and people here know a lot of stuff. So
So I think we got a question that's sort of along those lines, which is about, and we get this question a lot, about the lines between hardware, software, algorithm roles. How sharp are these lines? And do you have to be sort of a generalist and be good at everything? I think maybe I'll give that answer too, which is they're so blurred that the reason I got this job is I threw my resume at, I think, a software engineering role, which I clearly was not well qualified for. It was not the right, but I was like, oh, I'm interested in this team. I'm going to apply here. I think like Alejandra, we've spoken before about how hardware engineer versus research scientist, those lines are really blurry. So I'm interested, actually, maybe Alejandra, you're the right person to answer this question. Like, how distinct are these lines between roles?
Yeah, that's a good question. Also, because I still have it. Like, it's not very clear where to draw that line, and I think that's good. Mostly because maybe another misconception that I had is like, I was really scared that because I was going to industry, I was gonna be put in a box. Aaron and I were talking about this earlier. Like, this is what you need to do, and you only do this. I was very scared about that, and it's definitely not the case. Like, I feel like I don't know how to label myself, but I work with hardware, software. I hope to be learning also like research skills. So I don't know, it's a blurry line that I think it might be uncomfortable, but it's also cool because it allows you to explore different things as well and like grow in different directions that you maybe want to grow.
Yeah.
And also maybe the fact that we set up our hardware to be accessed by everybody without needing to reserve or ask permission. So anybody who has any idea can try to run it, format software and run it on the hardware and see the results without asking for permission.
Yeah.
So I think that that's good.
It sort of represents how it feels to be here. I agree. I think maybe Dripta, there's a question for you. We got a question that was asked at Google Quantum: how often do researchers meet with their collaborators?
I mean, I assume you mean internally. At which point, like internal collaborators, you can meet whenever. Like, I mean, we have chats that are basically live at all times, kind of constant communication lines. And then, we have weekly meetings. We'll have some meetings that are bi-weekly, but it's a very like free culture of like, hey, I need to be with you. I'm going to put some time on your calendar and I'm just going to claim you for 30 minutes now, which I thought I was very uncomfortable with when I joined. I was like, I'm going to ask permission. I'm going to really like share. And then it's like, no, just if you need to talk to me, put it on there and I'll talk to you. That culture is like very open. For external collaborators, I mean, we meet pretty regularly depending on the time scale of the project, but I certainly don't feel like I'm limited in my ability to meet with somebody that I need to talk to ever, basically.
Yeah. I think it's a little bit like Swiss cheese to the outside world.
Yeah.
So some people meet with collaborators every day, and depending on the project cadence, especially towards the end, sometimes you're meeting even on a call all day long with a collaborator, and sometimes you don't meet with them for a little while. I think maybe our last question, depending on how fast everyone answers it, is one that we've sort of already taken, which is: can undergrads with experience in quantum research join Google Quantum AI, or is it fundamentally required to be having a PhD or a master's? So those of you who don't have a PhD or a master's, can you like answer this for me?
Yeah,
Is it cool?
it's totally cool. And I think as you alluded to earlier, that we have a need for all types of skill sets here. And I would say, I think this is what I've been hearing in a lot of the responses and answers, is that being a good team player goes a long way. It goes a really long way. And that means being able to be coached and follow those directives effectively. And then also being able to coach others and have them understand and follow those directives. But this is definitely a place where people can find success and find collaborators who can help them achieve that success and who want to help them achieve that success.
Yeah, I know if you ever end up with me, interviewing with me, and you're going to interview with me, you're probably going to get a question where I ask you to teach me something I don't know in 5 minutes. And part of that is a way that I sort of test that out. I want teammates who can teach me things. So yeah, that's a great answer. Okay, actually we have a few more seconds, and I want to ask Rebecca. I think a lot of people listening right now are sort of like junior and just entering their career, but there are also people who are considering sort of changing fields. I'd like to know, one, I know you're a parent. What do you think this is going to be like when your children enter the workforce?
I have a lot of hope for that. That's one of the reasons I joined the team, was to make a impact and a contribution on something that I thought was going to last into our future. So my son is 9, and I can picture when he goes to college working on a project that he couldn't solve with a classical computer. So that's really what I see in that time frame, in 10-ish years, having these systems out and available, solving complex problems that we couldn't solve today.
Do you have any suggestions for people who maybe are more senior but thinking of changing fields?
I think my biggest advice would be open to the idea that you're not going to be comfortable or know that technology, but that you've had contributions in other ways, and those can be valuable to this team.
Yeah, that accepting discomfort seems to be a little bit of a theme, huh? Okay. Thank you all so much for joining me, panelists, and also thank all of you for joining us this morning. Please stay tuned. We have some great content coming up, and then we'll have a career fair later in the day.